My name is Anna Turner. The night my father accused me of getting knocked up and my mother told me I'd be on my own if I ruined my future, I believed them. What they didn't see coming was that I'd rise from that betrayal and one day, they'd watch the girl they discarded soar so high they'd choke on their silence. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'm so curious to see who's listening. If you've ever been cast aside by the very people who should have had your back, this story might feel painfully familiar. It was 2:04 a.m. The suburban street outside was silent, bathed in a soft orange glow from the flickering street lamp. I turned my key in the lock as quietly as I could, heart thudding in my chest. Maybe if I was fast and quiet, no one would notice I'd been out. I wasn't sneaking around, I just lost track of time talking with Jake at his place, the kind of lost that feels like floating. As soon as I shut the front door behind me, the living room erupted. Click. A lamp snapped on, harsh and sudden. "Where have you been getting yourself knocked up?" My father's voice cut through the quiet like a slap across the face. Greg Turner, 45, proud of his lawn, his punctuality, and the iron rule he thought made him a good father. He was standing there in his worn work shirt, arms crossed, the veins in his neck bulging. My mother, Linda, sat on the couch with her legs crossed like she was watching a soap opera. "If you ruin your future, we won't lift a finger to help you," she said coldly, not even looking up from her glass of water. I froze like a deer in headlights, my backpack still slung over one shoulder. I just came from Jake's. We were talking about college stuff." "You think I'm stupid?" my dad barked. "You sneak in past 2 in the morning and want me to believe that?" My fists curled at my sides. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But somehow they always twisted things into a catastrophe. My voice trembled, but I held my ground. "I'm 18. I graduate next month. You don't get to talk to me like I'm some failure you're embarrassed of." My father stepped closer. "You live under my roof. You live by my rules." "Then maybe I won't live under your roof," I snapped, heat rushing to my face. My pulse roared in my ears. "I'll figure it out on my own." The air crackled between us. There was a long pause. I thought maybe I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But then my mother gave a soft, dismissive laugh. "Good," she said. "Let's see how far your independence gets you when life hits." That was it. No concern. No, "Are you okay?" Not even a basic question about how I'd been. Just judgment, cruel assumptions, and an open door to leave. I stormed upstairs before they could see the tears welling in my eyes, but I could still hear my dad muttering downstairs. "Ungrateful brat. She'll learn soon enough." I didn't slam my bedroom door. I locked it. Quietly, sat on my bed. Let the silence crash over me like a wave. I had no plan, no money, no clue what came next. But I knew one thing. I'd rather be alone than be treated like nothing by the people who were supposed to love me first. The pink line appeared like a cruel joke. I blinked, waited, blinked again. The second line stayed, faint but real. I was pregnant. My body went cold, even as my cheeks flushed with panic. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, the plastic stick in one hand, my phone in the other with a Google search that now felt like a punchline. "Can stress delay your period?" Guess not. My fingers went numb. The test slipped from my hand and landed on the floor with a soft clatter. I slid to my knees after it, the carpet pressing against my legs as a quiet sob pushed its way out of me before I could stop it. How was I going to do this? Alone? The silence in the room buzzed with the weight of it all. I wrapped my arms around myself and rocked, the way I used to when I was little and scared, except this time there was no mom knocking on the door asking if I needed tea, no dad calling me kiddo to make me smile. There was just me, and this awful, unbelievable truth. A baby. Jake didn't know. No one did. I had barely let myself consider the possibility before tonight. I thought I was being paranoid. A late period, that's all. I told myself it was the stress of finals, of fighting with my parents, of wondering what came next after graduation. But no, my life had taken a sharp turn while I wasn't looking. I crawled onto the bed, curled into a ball, and stared out the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, oblivious to the disaster that had unfolded in my tiny room. My fingers pressed to my lower belly. I wasn't even showing. Not yet. But I already felt exposed, raw, like the world could see what I had become. No, not what I had become. What I was. Still Anna, still me. Just not the same version anymore. The tears came harder now. Messy, gasping sobs that I buried into my pillow, muffling the sound so my parents wouldn't hear. Not that they'd come check on me if they did. They had already made it clear what they thought of me. If you ruin your future, we won't lift a finger to help you. Those words haunted me. Were they prophetic? Had I already ruined it? Would they even let me stay here once they found out? I sat up abruptly, wiping my face. I needed to think. I needed a plan. No, first I needed to breathe. I grabbed the glass of water on my nightstand and took a shaky sip. The taste was metallic, or maybe that was just the panic in my throat. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Miss you already. You get home okay?" I stared at the screen, not sure how to reply. I couldn't tell him like this. Not over text. Not while I was still trying to convince myself this was real. He was sweet, though. Good. Kind, even, maybe too kind for a mess like this. I set the phone down and turned off the light. As I lay in the dark, eyes wide open, I imagined every possible version of tomorrow. Some where I told Jake and he ran, others where he smiled and said, "We'll figure it out." But none of them erased the one cold truth curling beside me under the blanket like a secret I couldn't put back. I was going to be a mother, and I had no idea how to survive that without a family behind me. But somewhere, deep under the panic and shame, a flicker of something stubborn sparked. A voice in me whispered, "They think you'll break. Then don't. They want you to beg. Don't you dare." Maybe they were right about one thing. I'd figure it out on my own. And one day, they'd wish they hadn't thrown me away. The pregnancy test was still in my hoodie pocket when I sat down beside Jake on the sun-warmed park bench. The weight of it felt unreal, like a cursed artifact from some ancient myth. He was sipping from a plastic coffee cup, legs stretched out, his smile easy and unaware. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep." I laughed, short, tight. "I didn't." He turned to me fully, his brow furrowing with that protectiveness I used to find endearing, but now only made me more afraid of what I was about to destroy. Jake Reynolds wasn't just my boyfriend. He was the first person who made me feel safe after years of living in a house where every word felt like a landmine. He believed in me even when I barely believed in myself, and I was about to hand him a reality he never asked for. "There's something I have to tell you," I said quietly, fingers tightening around the edge of the bench. "And I need you to let me finish before you say anything." He straightened, coffee forgot. "Okay." My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. "I'm pregnant." The word hung in the air like a gunshot in church. Jake blinked once, then again, his jaw twitched. "You're sure?" I nodded and pulled the test out of my pocket, handing it to him like it was proof in a courtroom. He stared at it for a long time, like he was trying to decode some ancient language. Then he stood up. I stood too, fast. "Jake, wait." He looked around, breathing suddenly shallow. "I need a minute, just stay here, I'll be back." "What?" My heart dropped. "Where are you going?" "I just need to think." And with that, he turned and jogged across the park lawn. I stood there in stunned silence as the worst-case scenario unfolded in real time. People passed by with strollers and dogs and iced lattes, unaware that my world had just cracked open. He was gone. He'd left. I shouldn't have told him here. I shouldn't have told him at all. Oh my God, I'm going to be completely alone. 20 minutes passed, every one of them an earthquake. I checked my phone 3 times. Nothing. The test sat beside me like a scarlet letter, and I hated how it made me feel like I'd done something shameful by existing. I was preparing myself to walk away, humiliated and hollow, when I heard footsteps pounding toward me. Jake. He was out of breath, holding something in his hand. His hair was windblown, his shirt untucked, and his eyes were wide with something wild and bright. "Sorry," he said, panting. "I had to run." "Run where?" He dropped to one knee and held up a ring. A simple silver band, no diamond, no velvet box, just a circle, steady and solid. "If you're having my baby," he said, voice shaking, "then you're going to be my bride." My brain short-circuited. "What, Jake, are you serious?" "I know it's not the plan, I know we're young, but I want this, I want you. And I want this baby if you'll let me be part of this, if you'll let me try." I stared at him, at the ring. at the face of the boy who hadn't run away but toward something terrifying and beautiful. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what to feel. But I reached out, and I said yes. Not because it was perfect, not because I wasn't terrified, but because for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. Jake pulled me into his arms right there on the park bench, and we held each other in stunned, fragile silence while the world spun on without noticing that something brand new had begun. I stood just outside the kitchen doorway, hands slick with sweat and heart pounding like it wanted to break through my ribs. This was the moment. Jake was waiting in the car with the engine running, but I'd insisted. I need to tell them myself, not over text, not by voicemail, face to face, so they'd hear it, so I'd see exactly how much or how little I meant to them. My parents sat at the kitchen table as if nothing in the world had changed. My dad was reading the sports section with a half-drunk mug of coffee in front of him, and my mom was scrolling on her tablet like she hadn't iced me out for weeks. I stepped forward, every cell in my body screaming don't, but I did it anyway. "I'm pregnant," I said, voice clear but quiet, "and I'm getting married." It was like I dropped a grenade in the middle of the table. My dad looked up first, his face unreadable for a split second, then his jaw tightened, and he shoved his chair back so hard it scraped the tile. "You've got to be kidding me." "No," I said, "I'm not." He stood, the full force of his height used to make me feel safe. Now it just felt like a shadow looming. "So that's it. You sneak around with that boy, you get knocked up, and now you think throwing a wedding on top makes it honorable." "It's not about honor," I shot back, shaking. "It's about responsibility and love." He let out a bitter laugh. "Love, right. You're 18, Anna. You don't even know who you are yet, let alone what love means." "I know enough to know that this baby didn't ask to be here," I said, my voice tightening. "And I'm not going to let it grow up around the kind of poison I did." That hit him. His nostrils flared. "You think we were poison?" My mother finally chimed in. Her voice was calm, detached, like she was diagnosing a patient from across a glass wall. "If you walk out that door tonight, Anna, don't expect us to chase after you. Don't expect help. Don't expect anything." "I didn't come to ask for help," I said. "I came to give you a chance to be part of my future. A chance to meet your grandchild. A chance to show me you cared." My mom just blinked. "Well," she said, standing slowly, "I guess you've made your choice." My dad's mug slammed against the counter. "Pack your things, go ruin your life somewhere else." I don't remember how I walked up the stairs. I just remember the feeling, like I was rising out of my own body. Like some part of me had already left, and this was just a formality. I grabbed the blue suitcase from under the bed and yanked open drawers. Socks, shirts, my toothbrush, the tiny giraffe plush I'd had since kindergarten. I threw it all in, fingers numb, chest hollow. No one came to stop me. No one shouted, "Wait," or "Let's talk." Downstairs, I heard footsteps, but not toward me. They were retreating deeper into the house, out of sight, out of heart. My hand hovered over my high school diploma still pinned on the wall. Then I left it. Let it collect dust with all the other framed lies. When I stepped outside, the air hit me like ice. Jake's car was idling at the curb. He saw me, jumped out, and came around just as I was dragging my suitcase across the lawn. "You okay?" he asked, reaching for the bag. I didn't answer. I was afraid if I said anything, just one word, I'd cry. He opened the passenger door and gently guided me in like I was made of glass. From the porch, the light flicked off. Like they were saying, "She's gone." Jake put the car in drive, and we rolled forward slowly. I didn't look back. Let them watch from their windows. Let them pat themselves on the back for keeping their house orderly and respectable. They thought they were cutting me off. They didn't realize they were setting me free. Jake didn't speak as we drove. Not at first. Just held the wheel with one hand and reached over to grip mine with the other. His thumb brushed slow circles across the back of my hand. That tiny motion, steady, quiet, kept me from unraveling. The highway lights flicked past, painting our faces in gold and shadow. "What if they hate me?" I finally asked. My voice was barely a whisper, like I was scared the truth might echo too loud inside his car. Jake glanced over, his eyes warm despite the dimness. "They already know, and they don't hate you. They want to meet you, tonight." My stomach flipped. "Tonight?" He gave a sheepish smile. "Yeah, I kind of couldn't keep this from them. My mom figured it out just by the way I was acting." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep the fear from swallowing me. I don't have anything nice to wear. Jake chuckled. Anna, you could show up in pajamas and they'd still try to feed you half the fridge and knit you a blanket. We pulled off the freeway and into a neighborhood I didn't recognize, tree-lined streets, old brick homes with soft porch lights glowing like they meant something. It wasn't flashy, but it was warm, real. As we slowed in front of a 2-story red brick house with a wraparound porch and a swing swaying gently in the breeze, I could feel my chest tightening again. I don't know if I can go in, I said. Jake turned off the engine. You don't have to impress them, just be you. I stared at the porch. At the woman standing there in a blue apron and slippers, wiping her hands on a dish towel and watching us with a soft smile. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like Sunday afternoon. She's waiting, Jake whispered. Come on. He opened my door and helped me out like I was royalty, not a teenage girl with a bruised heart and a suitcase full of fear. As we stepped onto the porch, the woman stepped forward. You must be Anna, she said, and before I could nod, she had pulled me into a hug. Warm, long, real. I'm Margaret, Jake's mom, she said gently, pulling back to look at me. And I'm so glad you're here. I was too stunned to reply. No questions, no lectures, no judgment. Just kindness. Your room's ready, she said. You must be starving. Inside, the house smelled like roast chicken and fresh bread. A golden retriever padded up to greet us with a wag of his tail. At the table sat a tall man with graying hair and a kind face. Jake's dad. He stood, extended his hand, then changed his mind and pulled me into a side hug that made my throat tighten with emotion. We already consider you family, he said simply. Whatever you need, you've got it here. I nodded, blinking hard. Thank you. Sit, Margaret said. Eat, talk later. The dinner was simple but perfect, roasted vegetables, potatoes, gravy that tasted like someone's grandmother made it. I barely spoke at first, afraid I'd say the wrong thing or cry into the mashed potatoes. But they didn't force conversation. They let me be quiet, let me breathe. Jake reached for my hand under the table, and when I looked over, he mouthed, see? I did see. I saw a kind of home I didn't know people still had. Later, after dinner, Margaret showed me to a cozy guest room with soft lighting, floral sheets, and a framed needlepoint on the wall that said, Love grows here. Bathroom's just down the hall, she said. There's fresh towels, take your time. Thank you, I said again, and I meant it. She paused in the doorway. You're safe here, sweetheart. I don't care what anyone else has said to you. You are not a problem, you're a blessing. She closed the door gently behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried quietly into the blanket. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time in a long time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken. I was just bruised. And bruises heal. Morning came gently. Sunlight slipped through the floral curtains, painting golden streaks across the room, and for once I didn't wake up to the weight of dread in my chest. Just silence, warm and quiet. The kind of peace that made me wonder if I was dreaming. I sat up slowly, brushing hair out of my face and listening to the soft hum of conversation downstairs. Plates clinking. Laughter. Jake's voice, then his mother's. Something about the baby needing oranges. It didn't sound like judgment. It sounded like life. When I finally made my way down to the kitchen, Margaret was flipping pancakes on the stove, wearing the same blue apron from the night before. She looked up and smiled like we were already family. Good morning, honey. Hope you like breakfast food because Jake told me you didn't eat much last night. Oh, I did, I said quickly. I just nerves. Well, no nerves today, she said, sliding a fluffy pancake onto a plate. Today is all about welcoming you. I sat at the table, quietly watching her move like she'd done this her whole life, cooking, smiling, asking nothing in return. The way she talked to me, like I wasn't a mistake to be corrected but a person to be cared for, was unsettling in the best possible way. Jake entered a minute later and kissed the top of my head. You slept okay. Better than I have in weeks. He pulled out the chair beside me. Good, because after breakfast, we've got a surprise. I blinked. A surprise? His dad, David, came in from the back patio just then, brushing crumbs off his hands. Figured we'd make things official today. Official. Jake smirked. You'll see. After breakfast, 3 pancakes, scrambled eggs, and a glass of orange juice I couldn't believe I finished. They led me down the hallway, past the family room, into a den filled with photographs. That's when I saw it. A picture frame on the wall, big and polished, holding a black and white photo of a much younger David in front of a skyscraper. The nameplate read, David Reynolds, founder, Reynolds Real Estate Group. My heart jumped. Reynolds Real Estate. I'd heard that name my entire childhood. My dad used to work for that company, bragged about it like it was a badge of honor until he got laid off and blamed everyone but himself. I stepped closer, staring at the photo. That's your dad? I asked Jake. Yep, surprised. I turned to him, speechless. My dad worked for him years ago. He always used to say Reynolds was the reason he even had a shot at a good career. Jake laughed. Guess it all comes full circle. I stopped. I don't know what to say. Margaret came in behind us. You don't have to say anything, sweetie. What matters now is where you're going, not where your father got stuck. I nodded, my mind still spinning. Was this what life looked like when it wasn't ruled by fear? When people didn't hoard love like a resource but offered it freely, even to someone who hadn't earned it? That afternoon, Margaret and I sat in the sunroom while she folded laundry and talked to me like I was her own. She asked about the baby's due date, about how I was feeling if I'd thought about names yet. I didn't know how to answer. I'd barely had a second to consider those things. I think I'm just trying to survive one day at a time, I admitted. She nodded knowingly. That's all right. We'll walk the days with you. David joined us later with a folder of brochures, prenatal care, local clinics, resources. He never once brought up his status or money, just showed me the options like I deserved to have them. That night over dinner, Jake said something that made me pause. You know, if we have a girl, he said, slicing into his chicken, we should give her a middle name that means strong. I looked at him. He wasn't joking. We weren't playing house. We were building one, day by day, and somehow I'd gone from being cast out to being taken in, not just into a house, but into a family. By the time I stepped out of Jake's car, the air outside my parents' house felt different. It wasn't colder. It wasn't darker, but I was. Jake offered to come in with me, but I shook my head. I won't be long, just packing up what's left. He nodded, leaned across the center console, and pressed a kiss to my forehead. Call me if anything feels off. I gave him a small smile, appreciating the steadiness in his voice. I will. The driveway looked exactly as it always had, cracked pavement, oil stains, the porch light that buzzed like it hated its job. But standing there now, with my hoodie zipped over my growing body and a ring on my finger, I didn't feel like the girl who left. I felt like someone she'd be proud of. Still, my hands trembled as I unlocked the front door. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the night they told me I was a disgrace. Since I dragged my suitcase down these steps while my mother stared through me like I'd already died. The lock clicked. I stepped inside. The living room was quiet, but not empty. My dad was in his chair. My mom sat on the couch. Both turned to look at me with expressions I couldn't quite read, part disgust, part surprise, maybe a flicker of discomfort they didn't want to name. I'm just here to get the rest of my things, I said, my voice flat. I won't be long. My dad leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Back for more charity. My heart rate spiked. No, just what's mine. My mother snorted. Don't forget your street pillow. I ignored them both and headed up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My room was just as I left it. Bare mattress, closet doors half open. The drawer handles loose from years of being slammed in frustration. I moved quickly, clothes, notebooks, the sketchbed I kept hidden behind my bookshelf. Everything went into a duffel I'd brought for this very purpose. I didn't cry, not this time. But then, just as I was zipping up the bag, something outside roared like thunder. The whole house vibrated. My dad's voice rose from downstairs. What the hell is that? I rushed to the window, heart pounding. A helicopter. Descending like something out of a movie, it stirred the trees into a frenzy and kicked up leaves all across the lawn. It was white, sleek, and beautiful, and landing right on the grass in front of our house. And stepping out, Jake, in a charcoal gray suit that made him look older, more powerful, like the man he was becoming. I stared, frozen. My parents burst out the front door just as Jake crossed the lawn. His hair whipped in the wind, but his steps never faltered. He walked right up to them, extended his hand, and said, clear and calm, I'm Jake Reynolds. I believe you've underestimated your daughter. My mother's mouth dropped open. My father staggered back. R. Reynolds, he sputtered. As in Reynolds Real Estate? Jake smiled, polite but not warm. That's right. Inside, my knees buckled. They knew the name. Of course they did. Reynolds Real Estate. The same company my father always idolized. The same one that laid him off. The same one whose founder, David Reynolds, now called me family. My mom looked like she'd been slapped. I stepped out onto the porch just as Jake turned toward me. He extended his hand. I didn't even hesitate. I walked straight past my parents, down the steps, across the lawn, and took his hand in mine. Not once did I look back. As we climbed into the helicopter, the blades chopping the air around us, I caught one last glimpse of them, standing there, small and stunned, the lawn of their perfect life appended by the girl they thought they could erase. The door shut. We lifted off. And just like that, I rose higher than they ever imagined I could. The morning after the helicopter, I woke up in the Reynolds guest suite to 13 missed calls from a number I knew by heart and had no intention of calling back. But some people don't take silence as an answer. At 9:17 a.m., the knock came. It wasn't polite. It wasn't hesitant. It was loud, demanding, a sound that reached into my chest and pulled my heartbeat into my throat. Jake looked up from the breakfast tray he was preparing and frowned. "You expecting anyone?" I shook my head, my stomach already knotting. He went to the door and looked through the peephole. His whole body stiffened. "It's them," he said. "Your parents." I was halfway across the living room before I realized what I was doing. Something in me, old habit or misplaced hope, still thought maybe they were here to apologize. They weren't. Jake opened the door just enough to block them with his body. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. My dad's voice boomed past him. "Where is she?" "I'm right here," I said, stepping into view. They both turned toward me like vultures spotting movement. "You humiliated us," my mother snapped, eyes narrowing. "Parading around in helicopters like your royalty. And stealing our family name to do it," my dad added, voice rising. "You think marrying into money makes you better than us?" I stood my ground. "I think love makes me better than what I came from." My mom crossed her arms. "You didn't have to show off like that. That stunt on the lawn, do you even understand how that looked?" I blinked. "To who? The neighbors?" "To everyone," she hissed. "People talk, Anna. And we're the ones left looking like fools." Jake stepped closer to me. His presence was grounding, a silent reminder that I didn't owe anyone anything here. My dad jabbed a finger in Jake's direction. "You think your little rich boy act is impressive? You think money makes up for this circus?" I opened my mouth to respond, but I didn't have to. A voice, deep and commanding, cut through the room like a gavel. "That's enough." David Reynolds. He stepped out from the hallway dressed like he had just walked off a courtroom floor. Dark tailored suit, clean lines, no-nonsense eyes. Every inch of him radiated quiet power. My father turned, paled. "Mr. Reynolds," he stammered. David didn't offer a hand, didn't offer a smile, just stepped forward until he was eye level with the man who once worked under him. "You've come into my home uninvited," he said calmly, "to shout at your daughter, insult my son, and sling mud where you've already burned bridges. We're just trying to—" "No," David interrupted. "You're trying to save face, but this isn't about your reputation. This is about the girl you threw away when she needed you most." Neither of them spoke. David tilted his head. "Let me be very clear. If you harass her again, I will not hesitate to take legal action. You will not speak to her like that. You will not come here again. And if you so much as send another message designed to hurt her, you'll be dealing with me." The silence that followed was complete. My father's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. They looked at me one last time, maybe for pity, maybe for one last power play, but I didn't flinch. David stepped aside and Jake gently but firmly shut the door. It clicked softly. Final. Jake wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded, tears stinging, but not from pain, from the strange sensation of finally being defended. "She said I'd sleep on the streets," I whispered. Jake squeezed tighter. "Now you sleep in peace." It was a clear afternoon in early spring when I walked down the aisle. And no, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't trip on my dress or forget my vows, because this moment, I'd earned every second of it. The ceremony was held at a countryside venue just outside the city. Fields of wildflowers surrounded the property, and white orchids lined the aisle like soft exclamation points leading to forever. A string quartet played something elegant but modern, Jake's idea, because he said I deserved music that felt like a soundtrack. The guests rose as I appeared. Margaret clasped her hands to her mouth, already weeping softly. Jake stood at the altar, straight-backed in a deep navy tux, eyes never leaving mine. And beside him, David Reynolds, my now father-in-law, offered the most grounding presence imaginable. As I stepped forward, each footfall felt like I was stamping out the past, not hiding it, just owning it. I wasn't the girl who had begged for acceptance anymore. I was the woman who stopped waiting for permission to be happy. The dress was simple, lace sleeves, flowing skirt, no frills. I didn't need frills. I needed strength, and it was sewn into every stitch like armor disguised as elegance. When I reached the altar, Jake took both my hands in his and whispered, "You're not shaking." I smiled. "I don't have anything to be afraid of anymore." The vows were our own. Mine were honest and unfiltered, about fear, about shame, about rising anyway. Jake's made everyone laugh and cry in the same breath. But it was David's toast, later at the reception, that hit me deepest. He stood, glass raised, the setting sun casting long shadows across the orchard trees behind him. "To Anna," he said, voice ringing clear, "who walked through fire with grace, who stood tall when others tried to cut her down, who reminded us all that dignity isn't something you're born with, it's something you claim." The room applauded. I looked around at the faces surrounding us, people who'd chosen to love me without conditions. Friends of Jake's family, colleagues, even a few college classmates I'd kept in touch with, now knowing who Jake's father really was. No one looked at me with pity. They looked at me like I belonged, because I did. My parents weren't there. They hadn't been invited, but I knew they saw it. Margaret told me later that someone had sent them a video, maybe a neighbor, maybe one of those concerned friends my mom always tried to impress. Did it hurt that they watched from a distance, faces twisted in fury and disbelief? Yes, but not for the reason they'd think. It hurt because once I would have given anything for them to clap for me. Now, I only hoped they saw what their silence created, not a broken girl, but a blooming one who learned the most beautiful revenge is peace. The night ended under string lights, our first dance slow and steady, my head on Jake's chest. The wind was warm, the music soft, and the stars came out just in time. For once in my life, the future didn't terrify me. It welcomed me. 3 weeks after the wedding, I found myself staring into the face of a miracle. She was smaller than I imagined. Soft cheeks, tiny fists, a halo of dark hair like mine. When the nurse handed her to me, wrapped in a yellow blanket and blinking up at the world like it owed her answers, something inside me snapped into place. I'd spent months carrying her under my ribcage, whispering apologies for the chaos, for the fear, for the nights I cried into the pillow wondering if I was enough. But now, holding her, there was no fear, just clarity. I was her mother, and that meant I had a job to do when no one else could. Jake sat beside me in the hospital room, his arm behind my shoulders, head leaning gently against mine as he stared at our daughter like she was the sun and he'd just been granted permission to orbit it. "What do we name her?" he asked softly. I already knew. "Elena," I whispered. He looked at me, surprised. "My grandmother's name," I said. "The only woman in my family who ever taught me that love should never be earned. It should just be given." He kissed my temple. "Then it's perfect." Elena Reynolds. The name sounded like a promise. Visitors came and went. Margaret brought soup and clean towels. David brought books on parenting and refused to let anyone else hold Elena until Jake gently pried her from his arms. The nurses smiled when they came in because we weren't just first-time parents, we were something else. Something grateful. Something whole. When we brought her home 2 days later, the Reynolds house looked different. Or maybe I did. The nursery had been painted while I was in the hospital. Soft lavender walls, white crib, a mobile made of tiny stars. A rocking chair sat in the corner with a basket of books beside it. Margaret had added her touch, of course, embroidered curtains, a handmade baby quilt with Elena's name already stitched in. "She has no idea how loved she is," Jake murmured, holding her to his chest. "She will," I said. "We'll make sure of it." That night, as I rocked Elena to sleep, her tiny hand curled around my finger, I thought back to the moment I first found out I was pregnant. Alone on my bedroom floor, afraid, abandoned, if only that girl could see me now. Not rescued, not lucky, rebuilt. The next morning, we received a delivery addressed to me. No return name, just a plain white envelope in a nondescript package. Inside was a simple card. No congratulations, no apology. Just 3 words, written in my mother's familiar script. I saw everything. That was it, no punctuation, no explanation, and I knew exactly what she meant. She'd seen the wedding, the helicopter, the way Jake looked at me, the toast David gave, the photo of Alina that Margaret had proudly posted, beaming like a grandmother who'd waited her whole life for this girl. She had seen everything, and I had nothing to say back. There was no wound left to reopen, no speech worth giving. I slid the card into a drawer, not to keep it, but to remind myself that closure doesn't always come wrapped in sorry. Sometimes it comes in silence, and sometimes that's more than enough. Years passed quietly the way healing does, not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in small, sacred moments. A pair of muddy shoes at the door, pancakes on Sunday mornings, the way Alina whispered "Mama" into my hair when she was scared of the thunder. She was 5 now, spirited, stubborn, and unreasonably curious. Jake always said she got her fire from me, though I suspected it was the Reynolds genes working overtime. Our life was simple, rich in the ways that mattered. I taught part-time art classes at a local community center. Jake was expanding his own real estate projects, carefully, ethically, not because he had to, but because he believed in doing things right. Margaret and David were more like a second set of parents than in-laws. Alina adored them, and not once did we speak of Greg or Linda Turner. Not really. They had faded into background noise, names we didn't need to mention. People who existed in the before, not the now. Until one spring morning changed that. It was a Thursday. The air smelled like tulips and rain-soaked pavement. I was wearing an oversized sweater and sipping lukewarm coffee while rushing to get Alina's lunch packed. "Mama, you forgot the strawberries," she called from the front door, already wearing her sparkly backpack. "Coming!" I tossed the container into her lunchbox, zipped it, and followed her outside. Our street was quiet. Birds chirped from the trees lining the sidewalks. Children climbed into SUVs. Moms waved at each other with sleepy smiles. And there, across from the school, sitting on a wooden bench near the playground, was my mother, Linda Turner, older, thinner, her once perfect hair now dulled by time. She was wearing a beige coat and holding a thermos with both hands, staring across the street like she belonged there. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just watched. I stopped in my tracks. Alina tugged my hand. "Mama, that lady's looking at you." "I know. Is she a friend?" "No, baby. She's someone I used to know." I walked Alina to her classroom, kissed her forehead, and watched her disappear through the door, her ponytail bouncing behind her. Then I turned back toward the bench. My mother was still sitting there. She stood when I approached, her expression unreadable, like she hadn't decided yet whether she was sorry or just curious. We stood face to face for the first time in over 5 years. I waited. She said nothing, so I nodded once, then turned and walked away. Because forgiveness doesn't always require a conversation, because strength isn't always loud, because sometimes dignity looks like walking past the person who watched you suffer and never lifted a finger. And knowing you built a life so full, so warm, so fiercely beautiful that their silence no longer has the power to freeze you. Some stories end with fireworks. Mine ended with something softer. A quiet Saturday afternoon. The sound of Alina humming as she drew butterflies in chalk on the driveway. Jake planting herbs along the edge of our porch, dirt smudged on his cheek. A breeze that smelled like lavender and soil. Nothing extraordinary, nothing newsworthy. And yet everything I'd once begged the world for. The kind of life I thought I'd never have. There are still days when memories sneak up on me. Not the dramatic ones, the shouting, the slammed doors, the sound of my own suitcase dragging across the lawn like a scar being carved into the earth. No, it's the quieter memories that haunt. The way my mother looked at me when she said, "Then sleep on the streets." The sound of my dad's voice as he muttered, "You're a disgrace." How easily they erased me. But healing didn't come from confronting them. It came from walking forward over and over until their voices grew too small to hear. Alina asks sometimes about my parents. She's starting to notice who's in our lives and who isn't. Why don't you have a mommy and daddy like daddy does? She asked one night, curled under my arm, eyes wide and innocent. I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't want to plant bitterness in soil where love was growing. They made choices, I said finally. And so did I. Did they hurt you? I looked down at her tiny face. Yes, I said honestly, but I got better because I found people who loved me the right way. She thought about that for a long moment. Then, like Daddy, I smiled. Like Daddy and Grandma Margaret and Grandpa David and now you. She grinned proudly, burying her face into my side. I love you the right way. And that's when I knew I'd broken the cycle, not with revenge. Not with public victories or dramatic scenes, but by choosing love every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. By refusing to let rejection be the final word. To every girl who's ever been cast aside, shamed, or silenced, know this: you don't need to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. You don't need to stay where love is conditional. You are not selfish for walking away from people who made you feel small. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in shouting back, but in building a life so bold, so beautiful, so undeniably your own that the people who left have no choice but to watch it grow without them. So if you're still in your storm, keep walking. The sun is still out there. And so are people who will see you, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as something brave and whole and worth loving exactly as you are. You just have to get far enough away from the noise to hear your own voice again. I did. And I promise you, it's the loudest thing in the world.